Uhuru. My name is Penny Hess, Chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee. The African People's Solidarity Committee stands in complete and unconditional solidarity with the struggle for political and economic power in the hands of the African working class in South Africa or Occupied Azania. The African People's Solidarity Committee is the organization of white people working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, led by Chairman Omali Yeshitela. The African People's Socialist Party is organizing African people around the world to unite and liberate Africa and African people forcibly dispersed around the world. The African People's Socialist Party created the African People's Solidarity Committee as a strategic front inside the white population, organizing for reparations to African people as a revolutionary demand. From APSC, we unite that the real looters in Azania are the colonial powers, the white ruling class, and the white colonizer population, who for more than 400 years have stolen the land, labor, minerals, and resources of African people to enrich ourselves while continuing to enslave the African working class on their own land. We denounce the violence being carried out by white people against the African working class and the criminalization of the African working class by the bourgeois media. 27 years after the installation of the ANC government, African workers still live in desperate poverty in shanty towns, deprived of the most basic necessities of life. White people, who are only about 7% of the population of South Africa, continue to own 80% of the land. In fact, the wealth gap between the colonizers and the colonized of South Africa has increased in the past 27 years, according to the World Bank. Clearly, the struggle against direct white colonial rule in South Africa has never been completed, as the African working class faces conditions as dire or worse than those under the apartheid regime. The African People's Solidarity Committee unites with the fact that Africa and all its resources belong to African people. APSC unites with the African People's Socialist Party's struggle for African workers to come to power, to take down the colonially imposed borders in Africa, to control the means of production and regain self-government throughout South Africa, the entire continent of Africa, and wherever African people have been forcibly dispersed throughout the world. We acknowledge that all white people are the colonizers and have lived at the expense of African and other colonized peoples for the last 600 years, when Europe first launched its assault on Africa by kidnapping, selling, and enslaving African people and in stealing their land and natural resources, a process that birthed the entire capitalist world economy as a mode of production, an economy that is a parasite sucking the blood of the majority of humanity, as Chairman Omali Yeshitela has taught us. We call on white people in Occupied Azania to recognize that it is the just and inevitable trajectory of history that African workers are rising up to finally throw off the chains imposed on them by colonialism, to regain control over their lives, their land, their means of production, their resources, and economy. APSC stands in solidarity with the African People's Socialist Party and the African Socialist International on the ground in Occupied Azania and throughout Africa, the US, and the world. All white people owe reparations to African people as the return of the stolen loot of the African nation that has fed white children and made them prosperous for centuries at the expense of African people. Reparations means returning the wealth to the African Revolution, which is organizing for self-government through economic and political power in the hands of the African working class. We call on white people to throw off our allegiance to colonialism, stand in solidarity with the African Revolution, building a future led by African workers' power, without the oppressors and the oppressed, without the colonizers and the colonized. All white people must pay reparations as a revolutionary stand. Join the African People's Solidarity Committee at apscohuru.org. Victory to African people, unity through reparations. Uhuru.